Welcome to the Bell Cow Author Roundup podcast, where we celebrate Minnesota's incredible fiction authors and the stories that make our literary scene so vibrant. I'm Rob Jung.
And I'm Michael MacBride. Together, we're the team behind Bell Cow Productions and the Bell Cow Catalog, a digital catalog designed to connect Minnesota authors with readers, libraries, and indie bookstores.
The catalog will be heading to all 377 Minnesota libraries, 80 plus indie bookstores, plus those in border cities such as Sioux Falls, Fargo, Superior, and La Crosse.
And now, with this podcast, we get to bring those amazing voices to life. Every episode features one of our herd members talking about their books, their writing journey, and the stories behind the stories.
And before we start, let us apologize for all the cow-related puns you're about to hear.
All right, let's dig in. Today, on this very special episode of the Bell Cow Roundup podcast, we have my business partner, the master of mystery, the master of Minnesota Mystery Night, and the author of Judgment Day, Rob Jung, on the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me.
Michael, thank you. You should all know, by the way, we're going to do this reciprocally also, because there'll be a future podcast where I interview Michael, but it's his turn to grill me today.
It's a little self-serving, we realize. However, we also figured it's probably the best way to get to know one another. I mean, this is what we're doing for other authors. This is a chance to kind of get to know your hosts, the people behind Bell Cow Productions. And what better way to do that than to chat? And like you said, I'll grill you a little bit, but no gotcha questions. So
I hope not.
So why don't you start off like we do typically with most of these? Give us a little bit about your background. I mean, I know about it obviously, but for everybody else out there, tell us a bit about what makes you tick and where you came from.
Okay. The brief story: I was born in California, transferred to the Midwest when I was too young to object. Um, I grew up in rural Wisconsin on a farm along the Mississippi River. So I'm both a farm kid and a river rat. Um, was a newspaper writer while I went to college. Took me 7 years to get an undergraduate degree. I was a slow learner. Then I went to law school and practiced law for 50 plus years. Toward the latter part of that, I started to become a writer and an author. I guess I've always been a writer. Become an author, and I succeeded in getting my first novel published when I was about 10 days short of my 76th birthday. Now I have 4 novels published, including a trilogy called the Chimera Chronicles, and the last book of the trilogy is Judgment Day, which was released in 2023. And I haven't released anything since, although I'm working on a couple of things.
I love it. There's so many things. It's funny, like when people talk to us, there are so many things that bring us together, I think, that commonalities that separate the decades, And one is my undergraduate degree took me 8.5 years. I didn't become a lawyer, but I hear towards the end of all your practicing, you got kind of good at it eventually, right?
No, still practicing. Uh, it was. I can't say that it was fun. Being a lawyer, I think, is not fun, but it is necessary. And I represented a lot of great people and got to know a lot of great people. My clients became my friends, and for the most part of the 50 plus years I was a lawyer, I was a sole practitioner, and so it was. It was a fairly easy transition into writing fiction from that standpoint, because that's kind of an isolating solo experience as well. Even though you do, bounce your writing off other people, and critique groups and editors and friends and all that, but it's still nevertheless you kind of write in a silo, and being a sole practitioner was sort of the same thing. So.
Yeah, so I know that you've written for a long time, both journalistically and fiction. But what were some of the earliest things you remember writing? I'm just kind of curious. Like, what did young Rob write in his bedroom?
One of the earliest things I can remember, this was actually, it wasn't the earliest thing, but in college, I I did a copious base research project on all of the alien and sedition laws in the United States, beginning with the very first one, the 1798 Alien and Sedition Law.
Wow.
And, learned a lot. I read a lot of the Library of Congress archives and the debates and all that that went on about them. But literally, with every war, we generated a new alien and sedition type act, and it was interesting that we seem to go into that sort of defensive, put a corral around it posture that ultimately, at least up until recently, uh, died when the conflict was over. Luckily,
What on earth drew you to that topic? Was it assigned? Like, did you have like a list that you chose from, and this was just the thing, or
I was, I guess I've always been sort of a Don Quixote type, tilting at windmills. And it was just something that intrigued me. I was aware of some of those acts, but I didn't realize there were so many that were part of U.S. law. And so it was part of my protest, I guess, against those kinds of laws and the idea that we are so insecure that we need to go out and pass laws to, you know, um, incarcerate the loyal Japanese Americans, in World War II with the Conspiracy Act, um, things like that. So anyway, that's
yeah?
one of the things I remember writing. Of course, I've written tons of newspaper stuff over the years, and um, my law school graduate theory was on a completely opposite note, but it was about why the Supreme Court was going to overturn the Flood case, which was the case in which they made Major League Baseball immune from the antitrust laws. And I graduated from law school in 1972, and they had a case, the Supreme Court had a case in front of it at that point in time where they had the opportunity to do the smart thing, and that is to say, yeah, you're subject to antitrust laws like any other business, and of which, of course, they failed to do. And so that's why the baseball doesn't have um, uh, the kinds of revenue sharing and salary caps and all that other stuff that other major league sports do, because the other major league sports are all subject to the antitrust laws. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, it's really odd, but so that was another non-fictional thing that I wrote at one point in time. So
So I'm curious then to come back to your current writing,
yeah,
the trilogy, the Chimera trilogy that you referenced. There are legal components to it. I'm wondering, especially the third book, the one that you'll read from Judgment Day. But I'm wondering, I don't know, what was the spark that generated this? And I know you started with the Reaper, but like, what was the thing that set that alight for you that you had to tell this story?
well, I have been a fan all my adult life of a Spanish painter named Joan Miró, who was one of the leaders of the avant-garde movement back in the first half of the 20th century. In fact, if I tilt my screen just a little bit, you can see a Miró right next to my hat, um, the inverted man. But I was in uh, Barcelona traveling with my wife, and we went to the Miró Museum. And I learned that Miró painted a picture, actually a mural, for the Spanish pavilion at the 1937 World Exposition in Paris. And that when they tore the pavilion down and the exposition ended, that painting that disappeared and has never been found. And that tweaked my interest. And so I wrote a book called The Reaper. The painting is named El Segador, which is Catalan for the reaper or the farmer, one or the other. And so the name of the book, The Reaper, comes from the painting. But I wrote a book that called The Reaper. That the first half of it was historical fiction, what happened the last week of the Paris Exposition, and all the competing interests who wanted to get their hands on this painting. And a painting that may be more familiar to other people was Pablo Picasso's Guernica, was also painted for that pavilion. And so those two murals were the focal point of the Spanish pavilion, which was at the time, Spain was in the middle of a civil war. And uh, that plays a part into this whole book too. Anyway, that's what spurred me to do it. Um, and then I realized because the painting is still missing and probably will never be found, because I think I know where it is. It's cut up in pieces. But be that as it may, I wrote then what happened when the still missing painting becomes the focal point of a struggle between an artist from St. Paul, Minnesota, and his very powerful estranged mother. And that's what the rest of the trilogy is about, the Sower and then Judgment Day. But the impetus behind it was the visit to the Moreau Foundation in Barcelona and finding out about the missing painting.
I love it. I remember the first time I came over for one of the critique groups, I saw the Moreaus in your office, and that was a painter that I fell in love with early on. Well, I guess in high school. And then for a long time, one of my very favorite T-shirts came from the Toledo Art Museum, and it was a painting of Moreau on the front, and it was this weird blue color that I really enjoyed. But um, weirdly, the T-shirt never said what the painting's name was, and it wasn't one of his popular ones. And I've tried to find that image, and now I no longer have the shirt, so I don't remember what it was. But
I think I
um,
have the, and it's just named Azure.
oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Okay,
I have a print of that painting that I'm sure what you're talking about because I've seen it on t-shirts.
I love it. Um, But yeah, tell us a bit about, I guess, I mean, you told the broad story, right? So book one is the Reaper, book two is the Sower. Give us the brief synopsis of that, and then lead to
Okay,
Judgment Day, and then we can hear a bit of that. So
sure. The When I wrote The Reaper, I thought it was a standalone, and then it ended in a murder, which was problematic because it really shouldn't end a book in a murder. So I had to solve the murder. And The Sower is the book that solves the murder, or at least supposedly solves the murder. But The Sower starts, the Reaper ends with a murder. The Sower starts with a different point of view on that murder scene. And then it goes on about how that murder finally, how the investigation of that murder involves this painter um, and his mother, who lives in New England and who is running for the U.S. Senate, and how that painting weaves its way through this story between them. At the end of the Sower, or close to the end of the Sower, I realized that the story wasn't over even after the arrest of the person who allegedly committed the murder. And so consequently, I wrote Judgment Day, which was the rest of the story. And it basically, Judgment Day is the book about the, the person, the woman charged with the murder, who is the painter's mother. It's no secret. You'll find that out when I start to read. Who has just been elected a U.S. senator, hasn't been sworn in yet, and she's arrested for the murder. And so it is her story from the time of that arrest until the story ends. So it's a psychological thriller, um, and it's an interesting book. I think luckily I've toiled long to make sure all three books could be read as standalones. But obviously, as with all trilogies, if you start at the beginning, you get a little more flesh and bone, or flesh to the bone, and a little more perspective on the whole story.
yeah,
But
I really love the way you did that. I mean, you're right; they do stand alone; they're independent. But if you read them together, and what you get is a different take on each of the characters, a different perspective, which I love. I mean, usually if you read a series, you get a deepening understanding and appreciation of those characters, and you get that through this trilogy, but you also then get a completely different look at them also, which is, I mean, I think it's unique. It's one of the things I think works really well in your trilogy. So, but would you give us a taste of Judgment Day, please?
I'd love to. This is the first, basically, it's the first 2.5 pages of the book. The first part starts New Year's Eve, 2014. The metamorphosis from self-confident business executive to defenseless little girl had been instantaneous the moment Magnolia Canaranzi saw him. She gasped as she crumpled from the stool into a heap on the floor. Her silky ivory-colored skirt twisted around her legs, and the matching blazer rode up her back. Mascara rivulets streaked her pale face. She looked small and vulnerable lying there, but it was her soft whimpers of "mommy" between sobs that struck Hamilton Blethen's heart. He could hear his own voice bleating the same futile lament in reply. Tears streamed down his dark brown cheeks, tears for himself and for her, knowing that her forlorn cry would bring to her no more solace than they had for him. A sudden movement at the door pulled his attention from the devastated woman on the floor. He looked up as two police officers pushed their way around his wheelchair and walked toward Magnolia. A male officer kneeled down beside her. Speaking softly, he said, "You are under arrest for the murder of Lorraine Blethen." Hamilton heard the click of the handcuffs and watched as Magnolia Canaranzi, senator-elect from the state of Massachusetts, was lifted to her feet. After 5.5 years, his grandmother's murder had finally been found, and in the process, after 36 years, Hamilton had finally succeeded in finding his estranged mother. He had not expected them to be the same person.
Love it.
1 month later, the Montreal Express whistled forlornly between the skyscrapers of downtown Boston, whipping snowflakes helter-skelter against the conference room windows of Taft, Hartman, and Lewinsky, attorneys at law. Inside, Napoleon Taft was confronting his newest client, Senator-elect Magnolia Canaranzi. "Senator, they have the testimony of this guy, Otto Bonhoeffer, who has admitted killing your mother, saying that you hired him to do it. They also have the person who was with him who will testify that the daughter of Lorraine Blethen hired them to kill her. And they have the packing slip that was used to gain access to the victim's home bearing your name, your birth name, Mary Blethen." "I didn't hire them or anyone to kill my mother," Magnolia Canaranzi repeated, her voice rising. "They're trying to frame me." "Bonhoeffer wasn't under arrest. He came forward on his own." "Isn't that the best evidence that I'm being framed?" she countered. "Someone who I don't even know and who is not even a suspect pops out of nowhere and accuses me of hiring him to kill my own mother." "He says you hired him to kill Aaron Feldman also." "That's obviously a lie." "So who's framing you? What's their motive?" "It has to be political," Magnolia answered. "I flipped a Senate seat. I'm a woman." "Senate seats get flipped all the time," Taft countered, "and the flipper doesn't get charged with murder. We're going to have to come up with something better than that." "It's my word against his," she snapped back. "Why should I kill my own mother?" "You hated your mother. You left home the day you graduated from high school," Taft responded, irritation creeping into his voice. "You have a history of violence. You shot a man just 2 months before you were arrested." "I was never arrested or charged for that," she shouted. "Aaron Feldman was a sleazy, lying son of a bitch." "He was a campaign worker who disappeared, allegedly, because you hired Bonhoeffer to take care of him," Taft interrupted flatly. "I shot the bastard in self-defense," Magnolia screamed. "You told the police you have no memory of shooting him or of what happened that night," Taft bellowed back. "You can't have it both ways. They'll crucify you on the witness stand if you try to make that claim now."
Awesome. I love it. One of the things that I know, but I'm going to ask you to share with other people is what one of your secrets to how you come up with such genius character names? Because I know as authors, that is often our bane of our existence. Like what name should this person have? It's got to be unique and interesting and memorable, and yours are always kind of fabulous. So I know, for instance, you've told me about the little notepad you hold that has
Oh,
names written down in it. But tell everyone where you get some of those names from.
okay. Well, a lot of my, I shouldn't say a lot, but I have a list of names that come off road signs. Streets, when you're going down the highway and it says one city, one direction, one city, the other. Particularly fruitful in that regard is the stretch on I-94 between Fargo and Bismarck, North Dakota. I think I have 30 names off those street signs. Magnolia Canaranzi comes off a street sign on I-90 on the way to Sturgis, South Dakota. And the story behind it's a fun story because Mary Blethen, which is this person's birth name, um, uh, is a drug addict. She's in her 20s, early 20s, and she's got drug problems. She's been in and out of jail. She's been, not a professional prostitute, but a now and again prostitute when she needs money. And she basically is run out of town. And she finds herself riding on the back of a motorcycle headed for Sturgis on a motorcycle whose driver she has no idea who he is. But on her way, she sees the sign that says Magnolia. If you turn left, you go to Magnolia. If you turn right, you go to Canaranzi. And she decides at that point in time she's going to change her name and become Italian royalty, Magnolia Canaranzi. And that's where the name is. And ultimately, she actually changes her name legally to that. So that's where the son comes from. But I get my name from silly things. I have a great grandson who graduated from kindergarten, and I went to the graduation, and the program had all the kids' names. When you mix and match them up, they make terrific names. So I saved the program, and I borrow from there. And so I don't know. And then I hear once in a while I'll get somebody that will they'll just have a really unique name. One of the characters in the book, primarily in The Sower, is named uh, uh, Veronica Brilliant. Um, and the name comes from a woman who actually owned a winery. And her last name was Brilliant. Uh, Owned a winery out in Healdsburg, California. And so after I met her, I asked her if I could steal her name for a book. And I've done that several times with people and used not their whole name, but part of their name and done that. So it's kind of a fun thing. I don't know, but I used to do that even when I was a newspaper writer. I would look for strange names and compile them. So
Yeah,
it's just
that's fun. So beyond, doing the Bell Cow productions and the podcast, and marketing and those kind of things, and Minnesota Mystery Night and Masters of Mystery, it almost feels indulgent to ask like what you're working on. But is there a writing project that currently has your attention?
there are two actually. One we're just finishing up. I have been involved in a group called Midwest Mystery Works, which is five Minnesota independent mystery authors, and we have written a novel together, each of us taking a character out of our other books and putting them together in a novel called, let me get this right now, The Kill Code Collective. It's a medical thriller, and we have just finished the editing process of the manuscript. We still have all the other stuff, the cover and the back cover and acknowledgments and da da da. We've got all that to put together. But it's taken about 2 years to write that book, and it's been a great exercise. We're still talking to each other, which is good.
That's
And
important.
yeah, it took some compromise, but we one of the five, it was his idea originally, Brian Luderman. We all determined earlier that whenever there was a dispute, he was the ultimate decider, to borrow a phrase from George Bush. Um, but so it all worked out well, and I think it's a pretty darn good book. The editor who did the final edit on it came back and said it's a really good book. And surprisingly, she didn't have a lot of changes to it. Um, but then all five of us edited it as we went. So that was one, and that will probably be released sometime early in 2026. And then the other project that I'm writing is a book that the idea came from a trip to Galena, Illinois, which is a fascinating city. Ulysses S. Grant lived there most of his life. Um, and I got an idea for a story when I was there. And the story, at least the working title of the story, is called First Stone. And it's another, like The Reaper, it's a split time book. First part of it is 1866, uh, as the Civil War comes to an end, and the people return to their hometowns. And then it fast forwards to 1950, and the modern part of it starts on the very day that Senator Eugene McCarthy makes his claim to the Women's Club of Wheeling, West Virginia, that there are 200 communists employed by the State Department, and the beginning of McCarthyism in the McCarthy era. And so it's a split time book, and I'm excited about the book. I like the book. I like the story a lot. Um, it is a it's another thriller, um, that it has some historical fiction aspects to it. So anyway, that one's probably a year away before we see the light of day on it. But that's what I'm working on right now. In
Cool.
addition to all the marketing stuff that you and I do together. So,
Yeah, I definitely look forward to both of those. And I know some of the other projects that are on the back burner as well that I'm still eager to read as well. But um so I do know that you like to cook. I'm curious of the things that you cook, what is your signature dish, or what do people come to expect when
for
they're like,
dish.
Rob, we're coming over to eat?
I guess if you would say, I mean, I really love to cook, and I do a lot of, or I used to do it more than I do now because now I'm involved in marketing books. But um, uh, I make a thing called Serbian stew, and it is a very rich, very hearty winter stew that people um, request that I make when I'm saying, oh, well, come on over for dinner, and they say, oh God, will you make your Serbian stew? So I guess I would have to say that's probably my signature dish. But I cook Italian a lot.
That's what I
I
was expecting you to say. It kind of blew me away that you chose Serbian stew. First of all, I've never heard of that before. So, secondly, I'm like, what's in this recipe? And third, of course, because it's like fall, winter right now. Not winter, but like we're easing into the fall and the cooler months. I'm definitely thinking about stews and soups and things. So,
um, Italian wise, I used to put on what basically was a 9 course Italian dinners, and we'd give them away for charity auctions. And we'd come and put on a dinner for 6 or 8 guests in your home. And that was always and it was fun because we always cooked something completely different. So I love to cook ossobuco, which veal shanks, and I don't know. I don't have I just love to cook. I just think it's fun. It's another way to be creative besides writing.
for sure. Yeah. Speaking of writing and books, who are your go-to authors? Like, somebody puts a new book out, who do you pick up automatically without blinking an eye?
Alan Eskins, first of all. In my opinion, he is the best mystery thriller writer in the country right now, and has been for the last, I don't know, half dozen years. And he lives in St. Peter, Minnesota, and he's not an independent author. I mean, he's published, he has a publisher, but I don't think he gets the recognition he deserves. Besides him, Kent Kruger, obviously. He's just really good. Um, I like Michael Connolly. Um, I like um, Jess Lowry, another Minnesota writer. There's God, because of Minnesota Mystery Night, I have had the opportunity to probably meet 80% of Minnesota's and you know Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, Iowa, South Dakota of the mystery thriller authors. Maybe that's, but something like that. A lot of them anyway. And we have such a great wealth of really good writers in Minnesota and surrounding states that you don't have to. I mean, I love David Baldacci and people like that, but you don't have to go to the big national titles to find really superb writers and great stories. So David, Housewright, another great St. Paul author, mystery author, and I could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, it's
but
great. I mean, you're
by
right. We have
automatic,
such a
the one that doesn't, without a doubt, I'll buy his book if he puts one out is Alan.
okay, cool. A twist on a question we ask sometimes, but in this one, I'm just going to specify. If Jean Moreau had not died in 1983 and you had a chance to meet him, what would you ask him? And do you think he knows what happened to his painting? You know?
I'll give you my theory on that after I answer your question, but uh, what I would like to ask him is about his friendship with Ernest Hemingway.
Yeah,
There's
that would be interesting.
a great story, and I touch upon it in The Reaper. But there's a great story about uh, Ernest Hemingway won a Moreau uh, painting in a poker game, and they became really great friends. And I would like to ask him more about that. And they spent a fair amount of time together when Hemingway was a reporter covering the Spanish Civil War for a couple of different news services.
At a time
And
like nobody in the US really knew what was going on or seemed to care.
yeah, and Moreau was actually exiled in Paris because his farm, he lived on a farm, I don't know, like 60 kilometers from Barcelona, but it had been overrun by the Franco uh,
Oh, interesting.
Castile military forces, and he was in exile, and that's where he and uh, yeah, it's great when you get old and can't remember names. Where they became friends anyway. And so I think that's what I'd
Do,
ask him about.
so do you think he had any insight into what happened with his painting?
I think he was very instrumental in what happened to his painting, but this is just my theory. What's made it interesting, I did a lot of research on this painting because it was so odd. First of all, it was 18 feet tall and 12 feet wide. And it was painted on construction panels of the same material that was used to construct the Spanish pavilion. You got to remember that the Spanish government was a Republican government based in Barcelona, and they were being basically militarily defeated by the Castilian monarchy led by Franco's uh, armies. Um, and they decided at the very last minute they were going to build a pavilion at the Paris Exposition because they were trying to rouse international support for the Spanish government. And they thought that would do it. But they built the thing on the cheap, and they had this really thin wallboard kind of stuff that they built the pavilion with, and there was excess wallboard, and Moreau painted El Segador on the excess wallboard because, truthfully, he was stuck in Paris and was, basically poor and didn't have any source of income other than an occasional painting that he would sell. And he was supposed to be paid for this painting by the Spanish government, which he never got paid for. Um, so the panels of the painting were 3 feet wide and 12 feet. No, I'm sorry, 4 feet wide and 12 feet tall. So you had two side by side panels to make it 12 by 8, and then two half panels that were 6 by 8 by 4. So you had 18 by 12 was the final thing. So I think what happened about the same time, um, there were a whole bunch of Moreau paintings that, uh, 12 to be exact, that came available. I'm sorry, 11 that became available over the course of a year that were 3 by 4 and all done on the same kind of particle board. And two of them were in the United States. Seven or nine of them are still in Europe somewhere. But I think what happened was because he hadn't been paid for it, I think he took the painting back and he cut it up into 3 by 4 sections and painted on them because he could sell those. And he couldn't sell, obviously, the whole mural. I think that's what happened to it. Then, and one of those boards is at the Southern Methodist University Art Museum, and the other one is out in Berkeley, California. Those are the two that are in the U.S. Um,
Interesting.
so I
I
think that's what happened.
I, I
That's
think
my
I think most people don't fully appreciate how non-precious artists were about their work and how often they painted over things and
yeah,
reused a canvas or whatever material they had to paint on that was
yeah,
handy. Um,
basically because
yeah,
they didn't make a lot of money and they were trying to
yeah,
figure out what, you know, it was an economic choice, I think.
yeah.
That's
All right, well, we'll close with one of your questions that you ask sometimes, which is if the sky weren't blue, what color would you paint it?
I would paint it red. I would paint it the color of uh, a morning red sunrise. I just think those are beautiful, even though it's, red sky at night, sailor's delight, red sky in the morning, sailor's for morning. I just think the morning, more than the sunsets, I think the sunrises are beautiful. And so that's what I painted.
I
So,
love it. Yeah.
okay.
Well, I know that you can find Rob online. We'll be sure to, of course, include his link for his webpage down below. For third Monday of every Monday, right, of every month. Let me try that again. Third Monday of every month, you can see him hosting Minnesota Mystery Night at Lucky's 13 in Mendota Heights. You can catch those shows as Masters of Mystery on radio channels, which we'll be sure to link as well. Um, Anything else we should mention?
I don't think so. I think everybody's had enough of me. So, Michael, thank you. Thank you. This was fun. I'm looking forward to getting to do the reciprocal with you.
It'll be fun. We'll find a time for that for sure. And of course, if you're curious more about Bell Cow Productions, you'll be able to find the link there as well. But thanks for joining us, Rob. See you again next time.
Take care.
Bye.
And don't forget, you can see this book and more from Minnesota authors in the Bell Cow catalog, heading to libraries and indie bookstores across Minnesota and beyond.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bell Cow Author Roundup podcast. We'll be back next Tuesday with another amazing Minnesota author.